Hello, and welcome to So You Think You Can Rule Persia, the podcast where we rate and review all the kings of Persia from Diocles to Yazdegerd III. I'm Serial, and my pronouns are they, them.
And I'm Umberto, and my pronouns are he, him. Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 73, Shapur IV, where we'll be talking about what happens after Yazdegerd was kicked to death by a magical horse.
Right.
Do things go well? Do things go poorly? How poorly? Oh no, that bad? Yes. So yeah, it's been a while since we've recorded an episode, so Cyril, what do you remember about Yazdegerd? Anything come to mind?
I am trying to remember what I drew. I think
good start.
Yeah, I think it was the meme of Miyazaki losing his mind.
That is correct. Yes.
So I think he was trying really hard to do a good job, and then things just were not working out for him. But I do not remember much else, other than the nobles being really annoying. But what's new?
That's their job. Yeah, he was just trying really hard to be nice and be at peace and not persecute people, and everybody was just getting in the way of that. And in the end, he was murdered. So that's fun. And yeah, he leaves a son in his stead, which is Shapur IV. What are your expectations for this Shapur? More towards Shapur 1 and 2, or more towards Shapur 3?
I genuinely do not remember. By the way, if I sound very out of it, I'm just very tired these last days. Yeah, it's hard for me to remember the details at the moment. Let me get my iPad real quick, and then I can look at the portraits and see what we talked about. So we're back to Shapur. Right, Shapur III was buried under his tent that collapsed on top of him. Shapur II was incredible. So that would be cool, Something tells me that might not be the case for this Shapur, because otherwise it would be more excited. But I can't remember if you mentioned you were very excited about this week, so maybe. And Shapur I was also really cool, with the Roman Emperor footrest.
Yes, Valerian, the hat stand. So, Shapur is a loaded name, but we'll have to see if this Shapur manages to live up to it. Or if we're done with good Shapurs and we only had 2 good ones and that's it.
That would be really sad, I hope not. But I guess there's still time.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's quickly recap what happened during the reign of Yazdegerd I, and then we can talk about what happened with his son Shapur. So, first of all, Yazdegerd was a very good king. He came out of a series of relatively short-lived rulers that had been murdered or deposed by the nobles, and Yazdegerd tried to get a handle on the nobles. He adopted the Roman emperor and established a long period of peace. He ensured tolerations for the Christians and established a new Church of the East so that there could be easier relations with the Christian communities of Mesopotamia. So he didn't do war, he didn't persecute people, but everybody hated him because of this, because they thought that he was too friendly to the Christians and he was going to turn Christian at some point, and he was too friendly to the Romans and he was just giving too much up to them. And they didn't exactly force him to turn back, but some Christians started burning fire temples, and Yazdegerd asked them to pay a fine, and they were like, no, you're persecuting us, and Yazdegerd tried to convince them not to die, but they did in the end, because, that's what happened. It was messy. But in the end, we saw that Yazdegerd I was murdered by nobles, probably, or killed by a magic horse.
Right.
Different things happen. Who knows? The thing is that Yazdegerd did have a plan for succession. He wanted Shapur to succeed, and as we'll see later on, Shapur was given an important position to try and take the throne. But all the nobles who had killed Yazdegerd decided that they might try and stop this succession plan and put their own puppet on the throne.
Because,
and everything would be fine and good forever.
Because that has worked so well for everybody.
So let's talk about Shapur himself. So what did he do? Where does he come from?
Where did he go?
Yes. So we don't know much about his youth because we don't know much about most people's youths. But based on the ages involved, he was probably born sometime in the 390s as the son of Yazdegerd I. So this means that sometime in his early 20s, late teens, Shapur got a big break in 414 or 416 when great news serial, the vassal king of Persian-ruled Armenia died.
Oh god, no.
And there's nobody to occupy
And now
the
Armenia's
throne.
back in the game. Goodbye, period of bliss.
But the good thing is that since Yazdegerd was the adopted father of the Roman emperor and everything was going really well and he was just treating peacefully with everybody, the Romans said, yeah, no, feel free to choose a new king of Armenia. That's okay by us. So, hooray, that's lovely.
I guess.
And who did Yazdegerd choose? Well, the traditional post for the heir to the throne of the Sassanid Empire is Armenia.
Right.
So, Shapur is now promoted to King of Armenia. Congratulations. We hope you enjoy ruling in this place.
Mm-hmm.
And, it has the double advantage of giving him some practice in how to rule a kingdom, and also if somebody tries to contest the succession, that means that Shapur has a whole kingdom to use against his enemies, which is always helpful when you're starting out. So, okay, great, Shapur is made King of Armenia. What do things look like in Armenia? How is that? So, if you remember from a few episodes ago, Armenia had been split into two parts sometimes in the 380s, where there was one smaller part, which was more Christianized, and went to a pro-Roman king, which was eventually later annexed into the Roman Empire, while the other majority of the kingdom went as a vassal to the Sassanids. So it was a slightly more Zoroastrian, or at least Mazdian part, although there is a lot of Christianity spreading more and more and more. It is rampant at this point, and Armenia seems to think that if it can be a vassal to the Sassanids but be Christian, that is sort of the best way to be as independent as possible.
I see, yeah.
So
I see why they would think that.
Yeah, they're trying to, survive. The Christian bit that was friendly to the Romans was absorbed into the Christian Roman Empire. If they're going to have a Mazdian bit, that is the easiest way to be absorbed into the Sassanid Empire, so they want to be as difficult to digest as possible. Although, to be fair, we don't get many external sources on Armenia in this period because it's a peaceful time between the two large empires, and the last major war, which was Julian's failed invasion of Mesopotamia, is now about 50 years past. So we've had 50 years of peace between Rome and Iran, which is quite nice. But it means that nobody's really writing much because it's not bloody and interesting for that sort of readership. But okay, so what had happened? So in the Treaty of 363, Armenia was left at the mercy of Shapur II, but some later regional conflicts resulted in the division of the Old Kingdom. But that didn't really mean that the kingdom itself stopped existing and its institutions were abolished, but simply that the pro-Roman and pro-Persian nobles of Armenia would continue doing their own thing, but there wouldn't be a general king of Armenia. There would be two separate kings of Armenia doing their own things. So it's, Armenia still exists, it's just being ruled in broken parts, is how it is. So it's a strange system, but, they're happy with it. This didn't work great for the Roman side because they kept the kings and the nobles for as little time as they could and then eventually got rid of them. Because when their king died, they just chose not to replace him and absorb the nobles, and that was the end of them. But the Persians are more accustomed to a delegated system and to dealing with nobles. They agreed that it'll be easier to govern Armenia if we have the local nobles who are friendly to us and we can talk with them directly and they probably know their region better. And hey, we can promise to respect their traditions. So that'll be nice. And it's also likely that most of Armenia went to the Iranian side because the nobles were given more rights.
Yeah.
Because essentially, all the nobles of Armenia were basically given a choice of saying, hey, who do you love more, Rome or Iran? And most of them went to Iran because they saw, hey, we get to keep our noble titles and get to continue ruling
Who's
our regions.
Who's gonna pay us more?
Fair enough.
That's who we like.
So it seems like the Iranians are trying to keep Armenia as it was before, except a lot more close to the overall empire. Although it's interesting enough that the concept of Armenia wasn't fully abolished even when the Romans conquered their part, because the noble families were closely tied to each other, and this meant that you couldn't really fully cut off both sides without some drastic measures, sort of like East and West Berlin. And there was still some compenetration between the two sides, which means that, you know, the families of Western Armenia could go into Eastern Armenia and vice versa because, well, they know each other or they're friends. They have, you know how noble titles can get where it's complicated, where I own a farm in your land, but I get to go through it because we are allies and you get to go to a mine that's in my land. And it's a whole thing where we can sort of interact. And yes, there is a border, but also since Rome and Iran are at peace, that border doesn't really mean too much. So if you want to go in this land or out of this land, that's also something you can do easily enough without too much stress. So that's quite nice. Armenia basically doesn't really change too much. It just continues on its own line, except now it is being more strongly controlled by the two superpowers, which now have decided to share Armenia instead of fight over it. And that's working well for everybody except the Armenians. Also, it's always fun to remember that the kings of Armenia are still traditionally the Arsacids and are descended from Vologases V all that time ago. And it's still the same family. They're just continuing onwards and being nice and peaceful.
Nice. Love to hear that.
But now, when Shapur IV takes over, this mixed situation seems to have been crystallizing into something more defined. So, yes, everything was permeable, but it's been a while that the Roman side has had no king, and their nobles are sort of being not exactly dragged, but strongly encouraged to go to Constantinople and leave back their traditional lands and make sure that it would be more administered by governors appointed from the capital as opposed to these nobles. And the Romans have also started to build fortifications in the regions more strongly held by the nobles. And this was essentially trying to clear up which side of Armenia was Roman and which side wasn't. So they're trying to put a fine point of saying, okay, yes, you can move back and forth, but not any armies or anything too big, because if you try, we'll find out as soon as possible. Another thing that Shapur is trying to do is he is trying to draw his side of Armenia closer to the rest of the empire. He is trying to convert them to Zoroastrianism and dissuade them from Christianity. But it looks like this wasn't terribly successful. It looks like, in general, the Armenians were just remaining as Christian as possible because they knew that if they stop being Christian, they will be taken in by everybody. And that's going to be a mess for them.
Just playing the game and trying to find the loopholes.
Yeah, it's like those animals that make themselves taste bad, so when they're eaten by a predator, they just fat back out.
It is exactly that. You are so right.
Exactly the same thing, yes. But okay, Shapur's been king for about 4 years, and then he suddenly receives the news that his father, Yazdegerd I, has mysteriously died during a hunting accident.
Ah, yes.
Oh no, I wonder what happened. At the same time, he hears that the nobles have refused to have any of his sons succeed him. So they are declaring that Shapur's succession is illegitimate. So now it's kind of a race for who can get to Ctesiphon first and proclaim themselves as the legitimate ruler.
This is not stressful at all. This is fine.
Absolutely not. It's fine. Because we don't only have to contend with the nobles candidate, who we'll find out more about later, but Yazdegerd had 3 sons. One of them was Shapur, king of Armenia, the eldest. Another one was a man called Bahram, who was living along the Arab Lakhmids, who were tributaries of the empire. It's kind of unclear why Bahram was in a foreign court. It's possible that he was being raised by friends and, trying to tighten relations with this vassal kingdom. Or he may have been exiled due to some disagreements with Yazdegerd, because it looks like Bahram likes persecutions and disagreed with his father, so maybe his father said, maybe go away for a while and cool down. And the last son is a man called Narse, who at the moment is still underage, so he is not doing anything.
Yeah.
And it's fine. He is not a player on the board at the moment. So while Shapur reenacts what his ancestor Narse takes the Armenian army and marches on Ctesiphon, where he is finally crowned King of Kings. So he's gotten to that means you get an episode. But yeah, so he has finally become king. So what do we do? Well, what he wants to do is try and gain support of the nobles and some powerful allies. Yeah, about that. The nobles don't support him because the nobles didn't want any son of Yazdegerd to succeed. And the nobles are all currently out of Ctesiphon. They were with Yazdegerd and he was in Iran proper. So the nobles are outside of Shapur's control, and his only ally is his side of Armenia. It doesn't look like he managed to call upon other bits of the empire, other foreign sides. And it also looks like Shapur wanted to continue the policies of Yazdegerd, so that's not making him any friends among the nobles, which is unfortunate. So what happens is that at some point, the nobles manage to get into contact with Shapur. And they try and have a discussion about how the empire should be run, and at the end of that discussion, Shapur ends up dead.
Oh, well,
yes.
It was a good run, I
guess. Nobles have their own puppet king, a man called Khosrow. Not Khosrow the First. Khosrow the Usurper is his name. He doesn't get a number.
I see. I guess
he
it
is
won't
the son
go very
of
well
Bahram
for
the
him.
Fourth, and he will be the one that gets to rule next time. But remember that Bahram, the son of Yazdegerd, is still out there, and he might have a bigger part to play in the future.
So he gets an episode, but not a number.
Yes. Serial, numbering kings is complicated. It is very difficult. It is like, it's a mess.
Yeah, it's true. I don't know why
I ended up deciding that it was worth it, but yes.
Well, this was a very underwhelming episode.
Yeah, we're sorry.
It was like, oh, they go here, they go there. Oh, Armenia is involved somehow. Oh, whoops. Okay, nothing happens. Just,
Yeah.
He gets killed. The nobles put someone on there that apparently is not gonna do great either.
Yeah, we'll get to see how long he lasts, but it's not a lot.
Wow.
But hey, we get a cool story next time about a lion. Or 2 lions. But hey,
oh, cool.
There we go. So, yeah. Not much about Shapur IV, but are you ready to rate him, Serial, and see how well he does compared to other kings?
Yeah, let's do it, I guess.
Our first category is final moments. How interesting was his death? Murdered by nobles. In a mysterious way that is not described.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking like around a 2, that level of things, because you don't receive much news. It's interesting that it's a murder, but nothing more, I would say. What are you thinking?
I am so just like about this entire episode. Yeah. I'm gonna agree with you. I'm sorry, I have not much to add. Like, not much happened. So, yeah.
Okay, so you're sticking with a 2 as well?
I'll agree with you.
So with a 2 and a 2, he gets a 2 out of 10 for final moments. Our next category is battle hardness. How good was he at war and fighting? He managed to march on the capital when there was nobody there. He managed to give enough orders to soldiers to move somewhere. I assume that requires the ability to speak or write or somehow sign to the soldiers to go in that direction vaguely and keep going until they hit the city.
Yep.
That's it.
That has to count for something, right?
Count for anything? Like, a trained monkey could do that. Yeah, I don't think we should reward this type of behavior. I'm gonna go for 0.
Yep. I don't know how, do you want to justify any points? I don't...
Yeah, unless you have any way to go for it. I fear not.
No.
Okay.
A 0 is fine.
So with a 0 and a 0, we get a 0 out of 20 for battle hardness. Our next category is scheminess. How good was he at plots and manipulations? He was a guy who did things, presumably. We don't really know. There is nothing to point out that he may have had schemes. He is just a guy.
Schemes may have been involved.
He suffered schemes, if anything.
We will never know, though.
I'm thinking a 0 here as well.
Yeah, same.
Okay, so 0 and a 0 is a 0 out of 20 for scheminess. Our next category is shock factor. How shocking was this man? You could argue something. He took the throne by force. It was meant to be his throne anyway, but he had to take it by force.
Yeah. That's very funny.
Like,
actually,
I feel like
no, this is his, but also fight for it.
Like, he didn't do very well, but I feel like maybe like a token point for the fact that he had to have a mini civil war to get the throne. Other than that, there's not much. He tries to convert Armenia to Zoroastrianism. He isn't very successful.
Good endeavor. Yeah. Good attempt, but it would have been cooler if it was successful.
Yeah. I'm thinking just like a 1 to acknowledge that things were done.
Yeah.
But that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I agree with you. I'm not going to have very strong opinions on this. That checks out.
So with a 1 and a 1, he gets a 2 out of 20 for shock factor. Our next category is Aaron Shine. How good was he for the Empire in general and Iran in particular? I mean, he seems to have ruled Armenia reasonably well. He kept it ticking along. And then he was unable to secure control of the empire and was killed, leaving a very messy situation in the succession. So, he ruled so briefly that I'm wondering if a 0 is worth it. Or if he maybe deserves something.
This episode is so depressing.
Yeah.
Because, stuff happened. It's not like with Cersei's, for example, where it was like, we didn't get a chance to. But it's still so. They fought for the throne, and then he was killed.
Yep. That's it. End of story. It's quite sad.
Okay.
He tried.
I was hoping.
But, yeah, so I'm going to say,
Sadness.
Aaron Shine, did he contribute anything to the empire, or if he hadn't existed, would anything have changed? I feel like it has to be a 0, because if he hadn't gotten to Ctesiphon first and he just, tripped and fell, that would have been the same, really. I feel like I'm going to give him a 0. What are you thinking?
Yeah, same.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So, with a 0 and a 0, we get a 0 out of 20 for Aaron Shine. Our next category is Face of Faces. What do you think this man looked like? He doesn't get a crown. You will not be surprised to hear.
Great. So I can't even use that as a,
He is a guy.
Okay. Well, let me draw a guy.
A guy with dude features.
Yeah. Sure, a person.
Okay, so Serial has finished their drawing. Let me pick it up and I'll describe it to you all.
Hooray.
Ooh, that's nice. I like it. It's great.
I drew something nice because I didn't have anything.
Good.
I found my own fun.
Yeah, it's very good.
What else am I supposed to do?
So what we have here is a lovely throne where there's basically a platform held up by 2 winged horses. They are cute and chubby. I like them. They're excellent.
Yes.
They have their front quarters are in the light and their hind quarters are in the dark, pointing towards the inside of the throne, which looks very cool and I like it. And on top of the throne, there is a lovely soft pillow for whoever would like to sit there, and it is glowing of radiant light because everybody aspires to the throne at some point. And where's Shapur, you may ask? Well, Shapur is lying down, his long hair spread out on the floor, his right hand reaching out towards the throne. But alas, there is an arrow in his back and a pool of blood by his front, showing that, though he tried, he definitely did not succeed fully in taking the throne.
He almost got there, you know?
Yeah. So thank you, Cyril. That is absolutely lovely. For all of you who'd like to see this, you can go to the Discord if you're a patron, or you can go on our website in Cyril's portrait gallery, or you can go to the notes of the episode in the description. And now let me show Sarah what he actually looked like. This is a coin from when he was king of Armenia, so he doesn't have like an official crown, but it's kind of sort of a crown, I guess. So you can have a look. It's a coin. Let me know what you think.
The crown is cool.
Crown's kind of nice.
Either horns or feathers like curving out from the top of the crown.
Well, you're right, they could be feathers. I interpreted them as horns, but it makes sense that they would also be feathers.
Does this king still have long hair? It's hard to tell. Also, no beard?
Yeah. See, it looks like he doesn't have much of a beard, but it might have been that he was in his late teens when he was made king of Armenia. So
right. This is
he was still too young.
So young guy, yeah. Because I don't think, I think that's just the neck, right? And then, decorations.
It does look like it's just the neck, yeah. If there is a beard, it's definitely been rubbed off with time.
Yeah.
And the long hair, you can't really tell it. It looks like it's all gathered in his crown.
Yeah. Yeah. So, hey, that's interesting. That's a new style.
Yeah, that's unusual.
We haven't seen in a while. But that also makes sense with him being a young king.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. I mean, cool. That is an interesting detail. It will give this a 1 because of that.
The edge
and maybe and maybe an extra point for being contemporary.
Yeah, I don't know if you want to downgrade it because it's not a coin of the empire but of Armenia.
It's what we have. It's it's not his fault that he didn't. Well, I mean, it's a little bit his fault, but not entirely his fault. He didn't get to be the emperor or the king. So
yeah, So I like the horns / feathers. That's nice. I like that he's young, so that's a bit unusual. The coin isn't great quality. It's not from Iran.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 points is fair. I think 2 points is it's nice, but could be better. Could be worse, to be fair, but he's a guy.
He is a guy for sure.
So I'm going with a 2. What are you? Are you also matching a 2 or more or less?
No, 2 is what I was gonna go for. Okay. Yeah.
Very well. So with a 2 and a 2, he gets a 1 out of 5 for Face of Faces. Our next category is lengthiness. For how long do you think he reigned?
He didn't. So, 4 months? I don't know.
See, we don't even get an amount of months, but that is what I set. Because,
hey! Hooray.
Spoilers, we're going to have 4 kings in a year. I've decided to give them all equal time on the throne, so... Actually, I gave him 3 months, so divide that by 4. He has 3 months, a quarter of a year, which, divided by 10 years, is 0.025 out of 5 for lengthiness. And that leads us to the final score, which is a grand total of 5.025 out of 100, which places him under Orodes III and above Alexander IV, also known as Baby Alex.
Interesting.
So you beat a literal child who did nothing, I suppose.
That sounds about right, yeah.
You're also better than Antiochus the Child, so congratulations. You are worse than Antiochus V, who was also a literal child. So, you know, ups and downs, I suppose. Good job, Shapur IV. You did what you could. And that leads us to the final question, which is to ask, is he short-lived enough? Is he feathers or horns enough? Is he enough to be a Shahanshah, or is he just a Shahanah?
No.
Yeah.
It wasn't, no. I feel like we will only have a Shahanshah who has such a short reign or something like that if it's something wild,
There is one I know of that might fit that bill.
Because I can see how that could happen, because, what a story. But it has to be a good story to tell.
Yeah.
Even if then the king itself, didn't reign for long.
I mean, the guy I'm thinking of rules for around a year, but he also has an epic poem about him. All about him.
Oh my god.
So, he's pretty cool.
That is incredible. Talk about live fast, die young.
Yeah, exactly. He's great. I love him.
See, that's cool. Or someone whose, circumstances are so wild that you're yeah. For example, I'm thinking of Bardia.
Bardia's
and how,
Although, to be fair, we didn't give it to
Technically,
Bardia,
like, nothing
so,
happened, but it's the myth around him that is, like,
yeah.
interesting. So, yeah.
But yeah, Shapur, this isn't you. You can go off into the desert, meet Bahram IV, and tell him that, hey, you got murdered too. That seems to run in the family. That's fun. We'll see if the Empire gets to improve. Yazdegerd did a good job, but will it happen again? Who knows? So that is the end of our episode. Thank you all for listening. We hope you had a good time with Shapur IV. Since it's still roughly in the summer period, our schedule is still going to be a little bit spotty in the next weeks, but hopefully we can bring you Khosrow the Usurper and eventually Bahram V coming later. Bahram V has a nickname. His name is Bahram Gur. What does that mean? Well, you'll find out.
You can't tell me that and then not tell me what it means.
Well, it's a mystery. You'll have to discover it.
I guess you can. I guess you just did. All right.
But
fine.
yeah, in
I'll
the
wait.
meantime, if you would like to support us, there are many ways to do that. You could join us on Patreon, which is great because you get extra episodes like Alcibiades, St. Thomas the Apostle,
Dionysus?
Dionysus
Straight
in
up
India.
God?
You can get Mithridates Eupator, the guy who fought Rome. You can get Han Wu-Di, the ruler of China. You can get the Maurya kings. There's a bunch of stuff
good.
there.
They're good, guys. It's a fun time.
Yeah, also, at the beginning of September, when this comes out, we're going to be voting for a new extra series. So if you want to get your voice heard and, help in selecting what we're going to be talking about next, please join. It's very interesting. Some of the possible candidates are Pompey the Great, Ptolemy III, who made the Library of Alexandria, Antiochus VII, the last great Seleucid king. You can have a look. If any of these sound interesting, you can join. If instead you'd rather not support us monetarily, that's fine, but we appreciate if you could just give us a review, short or long as you like, on your podcast app of choice so other people know that you enjoy us and you can spread the word, which is lovely.
You can just leave some stars or literally 2 to 3 words. I enjoy this, and that will help us. Or you can just recommend us to your friends, because word of mouth is powerful.
We recently got a review that was just good podcast 5 stars. That works. That's good.
We'll take it.
We'll take it. It's great. If
Yeah.
you write more words, also cool. But, no need to
We
write
read them.
an epic poem.
The epic poem about the podcast.
I mean, if you do,
Who
then,
talks about epic
please,
poems?
that would be amazing. But
Could you
that takes
imagine?
time.
People finding this centuries from now being like, what the hell?
But yeah, so we hope you have a lovely week, and we'll see you next time with Khosrow the Usurper. Have a good one.
Take
Bye.
care. Bye.